Hello, welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. I am your host, six-time near-death experiencer, afterlife speaker, as well as evidential psychic medium, Tamara Caulder Richardson. So thank you for watching. Also subscribe, hit the bell to get alerts, and also consider being a member. There's a lot of wonderful membership perks for everybody. So today's guest is it's a very soulful story. And let me tell you a little bit about them before I bring them on. And they are a near-death experiencer, and I'm talking about Rob Gentile. And now he has, he'll tell his story and his two NDEs, but his background is he has been in the steel industry as a sales rep for many years. He is also a motivational speaker and author of Quarks of Light. And he is married and does have a child. And I want to bring him on, and we're going to learn more about him. Thank you for being on the Seeking Heaven channel.
Thank you, Tamara, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Well, look, tell us, I wanted to, before all this happened, I mean, your whole life changed around after your near-death experience. So tell us what kind of life you had before, kind of leading up to it, so we get a feeling of who you were, who was Rob Gentile before all of this happened.
Sure, no problem. So I've been married for over 30 years. I've been, like you said, I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have one child, my daughter Maria, who has Rett syndrome, which is total care. Maria can't walk, talk, or feed herself.
Wow.
And my wife and I have been on a quest. Maria just turned 25 recently. So my wife and I have been on a quest ever since she was born. She was born normal, and then in 18 months after a series of events, she became what they would call non-responsive, and she began to spiral down and have a lot of issues, almost acting like she had severe autism. And then we realized it was a rare genetic condition which only strikes girls, and there's only about 365,000 people actually in the world that have Rett syndrome. So it shuts off a master gene in the brain, and then the brain cannot finish rewiring. So she's not mentally retarded or anything. It's just like the brain is held in suspended animation. But that's a whole nother story.
Wow.
But I've been in the steel industry my whole life, and I'm originally from a small town outside of Pittsburgh, and I live in North Carolina now. And what happened to me, Tamara, is that on January 26, 2016, I had a couple of days prior, I had actually gone back to my hometown in Pittsburgh to have some small outpatient surgery, really, where I had some bone spurs removed from my neck that were giving me some issues.
Okay.
And I returned home to North Carolina after that surgery. It was successful. And 4 days later, in my bed at 11 p.m., completely unexpected, because I've always been a healthy person, I had a massive heart attack.
Wow.
And
just out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
So you weren't like you were eating bad or doing wrong things. No. You look really healthy. I mean, yeah. So it was out of did you know that's what that was? And
well, come to find out, looking back now after my journey and everything that I've been through, my doctors, somehow that minor surgery was an anomaly, and I threw a blood clot. And so you can imagine 11 o'clock at night, here I am screaming and crashing around in bed. My wife dials 911. The ambulance arrives. I get rushed to the hospital. And they knew I was having a heart attack on the way to the hospital. But curiously, when they got me into the hospital, which is only 3 miles away from my home, they had given me some blood thinners, some medicines. And for a moment there, I was stable. But what happened is that
there was a stabilized.
What's that?
Oh, you just broke up for a minute. So you said you stabilized, and then what happened?
Yeah, I stabilized. So I was in a room with a nurse and my wife, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, and I was relatively unconscious. I don't remember anything about, the being in pain in bed or the ambulance ride or anything that was going on. But all of a sudden, out of the blue, I sprang forward on the gurney, what my wife would call later as like a scene out of the movie The Exorcist.
Oh my
I sprang forward on the gurney almost as if somebody had grabbed me by my lapels and just
Wow.
pulled
And
me
yanked you up.
forward.
Wow.
So I sprang forward, my eyes popped wide open, and I screamed out the name Frosty. And I collapsed backward on the gurney, code blue rang out through the hospital. I had flatlined, and in rushed a team of doctors who began to resuscitate me. Now, what's curious is that before my wife was ushered out of the room, she told the on-call doctor, she said, "You have to save him. We have a special needs child, and she cannot make this without him, and I can't do this alone." And she was ushered out of the room. She dropped down to her knees, began crying out to God to save me. And they could not resuscitate me. For 20 minutes, they tried resuscitating me. So I had the epinephrine needles shoved into my chest. I had paddle shocks, sternal rubs. They couldn't bring me back. But for some reason, the Indian woman, Dr. Patel, who I'm best friends with now, continued to work on me until she obtained a very slight pulse. And the cardiologist on call that night wasn't in the hospital, so he was en route. So when he arrived, he immediately did like an emergency catheterization. He found the blockage in my widowmaker. He put 2 stents in me, but it was too late. I had gone into cardiogenic shock. I was intubated, and I slipped into a 4-day coma.
Okay. Right. So, well, I understand. When I had pneumonia, I was out 15 minutes when I arrived dead, and then they put me in a induced coma when they finally got a pulse. But it was a lot longer than that. I understand it's weird. So, what happened during this time? Do you have memory of when you were out of it?
Well, here's what's curious about this whole thing. So, of course, during this 4-day period, and I was raised Catholic, my oldest brother drives down from Pittsburgh, calls the local priest, and the priest comes in and gives me my last rites, anoints me with oil. And during this 4-day period, several neurologists were brought in to see if I were brain dead. And on the 4th day, the doctor that intubated me told my family, "Look, we're gonna take the tubes out. We don't know what we have. If he's going to be a vegetable or if he's going to live, we're going to take the tubes out and see if he can breathe on his own." Well, obviously, I did. But what was interesting about this, what I found out later, Tamara, is that, so first day out of coma, my wife was the first one that came to my bedside. And she said I was talking like a child. I was talking like this exuberant little child. And I said to her, "You have to believe me. You have to believe me. Frosty came to me. Frosty came to me." And my wife said, "Oh my God, it makes sense now, because right before you flatlined, you sprang forward on the gurney and you screamed out his name. And I was screaming, 'No, no, 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 don't go to Frosty, don't go to Frosty.'" And here's the backstory. 7 weeks before I died that night, unfortunately, my brother-in-law, Frosty, had taken his own life. He had committed suicide. And he was living with his parents at the time. He was going through a divorce, and he was in the upstairs bedroom living with his parents. And early that morning, about 5:30 in the morning, his mother had called me and asked me to come down to the house to go up into the bedroom and try to find a journal or a note or anything that would explain why Frosty took his own life that night. So 7 times I went up into that bedroom, picking through a rather gruesome scene, until I did find a journal, which I gave to the family. So my wife said to me, "Tell me exactly what it is that Frosty said to you." And I said to her, he said, "I made a big mess out of things, and I need you to go back and help clean things up. But tell my family I'm in a good place." And what was curious to me about that is that really changed my whole paradigm about God, creator, because being raised Catholic, I was taught that suicide was the ultimate mortal sin. There was no pass
Right.
go. You were going straight to hell. But here's Frosty coming to me and telling me that he's in a good place. So that really gave me tremendous pause during that period of time when I came out of coma. But as the story goes, what's even more interesting is that, so the second day out of coma, my Dr. Patel, my doctor that worked on me that night and would not give up on me, came to my bedside. And it was kind of a very emotional meeting, because as soon as she saw me, she sat down beside me and she pulled up a chair. And she said to me, I can't tell you how many times I almost lost you. And she began to cry, and my arms were paralyzed. I couldn't move. So she reached down into my bed and she put her hand on mine. And what was curious is that immediately the conversation got personal. And she began to tell me, she said, I was so very, very close with my father, and we had this special relationship. We can almost read each other's minds. And I was pregnant with my child, my first child, that was a boy. And that's all my father talked about. Couldn't wait to see my boy's face. And she said, 6 months before I delivered, he died unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm. And she said, my faith was shaken, and, I didn't believe in, and she was Hindu. And she said, I didn't believe in the creator anymore, and I lost my way. And she said, but, seeing you here today gives me some hope that maybe, just maybe, there's something more out there. And then it hit me. While she was working on me, and because there was something puzzling besides Frosty, it was locked in my subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And while she was working on me, I kept on hearing this voice. A male voice had entered the room, a male spirit that kept on saying, don't give up on him. Keep working on him. You can save him. And I realized in that moment that it was her father speaking to her through me. And, in that moment, while she was at my bedside, I didn't tell her because I thought maybe I was going crazy. But it was later that I told Dr. Patel that was her father speaking to her. And it was a beautiful moment that we had when I told her that, because I said, you've never really been alone. Your father's spirit has always been with you. And he chose to come to you that night to save me.
Beautiful. And it shows how her family was working with your family.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Because
Wow.
I would come to learn later, when I had my second and most profound near-death experience, how we are all connected.
Right.
And that was, and interestingly, it was Frosty that changed my whole paradigm, my own spirituality, my belief systems, and everything else. And what was so important about that, not only to have Frosty come to me and tell me that, but I would learn later that he was preparing me for what was yet to come in Chicago.
Oh, wow. That's true. Yeah. It's amazing how much support we have on the other side. There's
Incredible.
so much over there and here as well. And it is seamless. So it's funny just doing this interview today. Your family knows my family over there. It's just,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
True. They're like, oh, he's a good kid. I'm like, okay. So it's true. It's just that quick. How beautiful. And that must have really, for her to talk to you that way. Wow, that's kind of personal, and for you to assist, and for you to be vulnerable and tell her what you saw probably changed her life.
Oh, it really has. Like I say, it's been 5 years now, particularly since the book came out. And of course, I'm sure that with her and all of my doctors, everyone, that I went back, interviewed each one of them, and made sure that, I had the story right. And I've journaled. Since Maria got sick, I've journaled my whole life. And so I journaled throughout this whole experience, because it's one thing, the memory can be tricky. It's one thing trying to remember things, but when you journal the moment, that is a whole different, it was actually what helped me write the book. Going back and seeing those notes and, comparing them to that moment in time was incredibly helpful to recall this whole journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you're very detail oriented and it paid off in this way because it does help to have the evidence to, especially if you're writing a book.
Yes.
So tell us how the Chicago thing happened. And also how Frosty ties in with this because he was preparing you for this big spiritually awakening experience here.
Exactly. Well, I think, like I say, I think Frosty's purpose was number one to let his parents know, and it gave them a tremendous amount of peace and solace to know that he was in a good place, and that for me, I never really, thought that it was a tenet of a loving creator to condemn someone. Frosty had a severe anxiety issue. He had gotten involved in drugs to deal with his anxiety, and then over-the-counter medications to help deal with anxiety. So the poor guy was really, his mind was not in a place. He would never have done something like that in his right mind. So all of those things were the lessons that I got from Frosty, and to open me up to what would happen in Chicago. Because the next phase was, Tamara, when I came out of coma, of course, my heart was completely destroyed. And the doctors here told me, look, the only way you're going to live is get a heart transplant. So, but before I left the hospital, they put me in this defibrillator vest that looks like a bulletproof vest a policeman would wear. So I had to wear that thing 24/7. And anytime my heart gave me an issue, this thing would shock me back to, to life to get the heart. Talk about PTSD, right? So
I was going to say that must have left effects more than just about anything. And how long do you have to wear this vest?
Well, I had to wear it round the clock. My heart was so weak. Then, as I began to move around a little bit and go to different transplant facilities here, I went to Duke. I went to a facility in Charlotte. They realized I was so weak that they actually put a port in my chest, and they put this medicine in me from
a what?
I had a pump attached to me that I
Got it.
over my left shoulder. So every 60 to 90 seconds, it would drip this medicine on my heart. My doctor said it was like STP for the heart. So it makes the heart pump harder and work harder, but it also sets the clock ticking fast. So the heart it was like on this timeline, it was going to wear out. It was barely working. So I had battery pack on my right shoulder for this vest to shock me back to life. I had a battery pack on my left shoulder with this port dripping medicine on my heart to keep me alive. And as fate would have it, I could not get a heart in North Carolina. So I was about to give up, and I called my boss at work. I work for an independently owned steel company. It's based out of Chicago. So it's kind of like a Hollywood story where this benefactor comes and saves you from the electric chair at the last moment.
Yeah, I mean, so did you ask for his help? Hey, by the way, can you call the hospital? I mean, how did that tie in, or was it just random?
Well, so I called my boss in Chicago, and I didn't know that the owner of the steel company that I work for is a philanthropist, and he donates quite a bit of money to the University of Chicago Medicine, and he's on the board. So I called my boss and I said, look, I can't get a heart. I'm going to have to resign. I don't know what's going to come of me. And my boss said, now, wait a minute, before you do that, let me talk to the owner. So the owner calls me 2 days later, and he said, Rob, you're going to get a call from a doctor in Chicago. I want you to listen to this guy and then tell me what you want to do. And, Tamara, it was unbelievable. This guy calls me, and he said, I'm Dr. Uriel. And by the way, Uriel is one of the angels.
Angels, yeah. It's one of the archangels.
One of the archangels. And he was.
It's actually my guardian angel. That's what I saw on my
Is that right?
So it's a good one to have. Yeah, seriously, it is. Uriel.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't know that at the time, by the way. So, and he has this thick Polish accent, and he says, hey, Rob, you come to Chicago, I transplant you in 3 months. And
oh my goodness.
So who could pass that up, right? So my wife and I were on a plane like 3 days later. We arranged our lead caregiver and a bunch of other people to take care of her. Of course, my wife was only with me a couple of days. She had to come home. But I went to Chicago, and Dr. Uriel saw me. He said, "I have no idea how you're even walking around, but we'll take it from here." And they certainly did. So what happened to me is that my heart was so weak that by some wild coincidence, they had been working on a brand new piece of technology in Chicago called the New Pulse heart pump. And this heart pump was designed by a very famous transplant surgeon, an Indian man, Dr. Juvanandan, who had been working on it for years. He came into my room one morning and he approached me and he told me about this pump and how he was going to go in through my chest and just fish this little skinny balloon down through the aorta.
Okay.
And out the left side of my body would come like a titanium disc with these wires, which would actually attach to this pump about the size of a lunchbox that was run by an iPad. And he said, "You'll be able to, continue to walk around and exercise so you don't atrophy and try to stay strong until your donor heart arrives." And I said, "Oh, wow, this is fantastic, Doc. How many people have you put into this thing?" And he said, "Well, that's just it. We've only tested this thing on cows."
You're it.
He said, "You're it." And I said, "Cows? You mean like where steaks come from?" And he said, "Well, we've tested it on a couple of pigs." And I said, oh, how comforting,
Yeah, exactly.
But I asked him, I said, "If this thing works, how many people can it help?" And he said, "I could tell you, not only is it going to work, but we're going to change the history of cardiac care together." And it did. So I had the New Pulse in for 3 weeks. And now, after 5 years, many a patient have been transplanted with the New Pulse.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
instead of staying in the hospital like me, which was the goal, they were able to go home with the New Pulse and stay with their families until their donor heart arrived. But
Wow, what that alone is amazing, because that really helps so many other people in the same condition from now on.
Incredible, Tamara. So,
Yeah.
So I got the New Pulse. I had it in 3 weeks, which ironically was the perfect amount of time that they needed to collect the data to go to the FDA for human trials. And here is where my story becomes really incredible, because this is where I had my second and most profound near-death experience. Because even with the heart pump and everything else that they had to try to keep me alive, heart gave out again. And in that moment, it was like the day before my donor heart arrived. In that moment, I was so exhausted. I'm about 172 pounds. There were a lot of other medical conditions going on too, which I'll save for the readers.
Okay.
But I atrophied down to about 138 pounds. I was a skeleton.
I can't imagine that, because you're pretty tall. I can't imagine that.
I'm about 5'10". So I just literally resigned my spirit. There was a raging storm outside my window in Chicago. I was on the 8th floor. And it was this raging storm just came out of nowhere one night, and sheets of rain were smashing against the window, and lightning, thunder, and up on the 8th floor, it's almost you're in the middle of this thing. And I just cried out and I resigned my spirit and I said, "Do with me what you will, because I'm done." And it was in that moment that I call it the ethereal, that I was taken up. And for a very brief moment, of course, nobody knows how long these things go on.
Right.
Time's
different.
Yes, and ironically, it's the shortest chapter in the book, because there's no language. You know this, being a near-death experiencer, that there's really no language for what it is that we experience. But for me, I can tell you what happened. when I resigned myself, all of a sudden, I found myself standing in the middle of nowhere. And it was like I was in this vacuum of sorts, this unending, infinite vastness. I found myself standing in the middle of nowhere. And I can see myself suspended in midair in my green hospital gown, and I look rather whole, but I could also see myself looking down, and I could see myself in my hospital bed, all green and atrophied with the heart pump attached to me and all the IVs and bags. And the way I explained it in the book, Tamara, because it's the easiest way I think for someone to relate, is like, it was like when you're in an airplane and it's a sunny, clear day, and you're looking out the window of an airplane and you could see everything, but yet nothing at the same time. That was the initial part of my experience. I could see myself, I'm standing in the middle of nowhere, and I don't see anything. But then I began to realize that I was in this place, and I started to get all of this knowledge downloaded into me, and it felt like I was one with everything. It felt like my being, the grains of my being were like picked up and just thrown into a strong wind, and I was scattered across this infinite, timeless universe. And after that, I saw and simultaneously became part of this gigantic interactive web. This is where the title of the book comes from, Light, because it looked like, we all know what a neuron looks like from science class. So a neuron has a nucleus, and it has these tentacles that, are woven together, just like the brain. And it looked like it was trillions and trillions and trillions of these neurons. And inside each nucleus was this spark of light, or a quark of light. And I realized in that place that each spark of light represented a life. And these neurons were woven together, and it looked like this tapestry that just hung on the ceiling of the universe. Curiously, some parts of that web were darker and some were brighter than others. And I came to understand what that was later. But when I was in that place and became connected to everything, it was there that I realized that if I hurt myself, I hurt everything connected to me. But if I loved, the light would spread. And in that place, I was not my race, my religion, my body. I was just part of this beautiful love and light, this divine place of such peace. And I had a life review of myself, and I had a life review of some of the nurses that were taking care of me. And that was such an incredible experience. Yes.
Wow.
What happened is that while I was in this place connected to everything, and by the way, in that place, at least my experience was that the five senses really didn't have any functionality in that place. I didn't smell anything. There was no sense of taste or smell. I didn't hear anything. And it was like, it was like all I had to do if I had a question to anything was observe, and it was already answered.
Right.
And those answers were kind of like telepathic. It was kind of like telepathy and synchronicity at the same time. If I had a question, I just thought about it, and there it was.
Yep.
And it's hard to explain this, but there was this, how the universe worked and its elegant design, all of that just seemed to be so simple. I remember thinking in that place, wow, it's one design, that the creator uses one design. We're all made of the same stuff. It's just that the creator uses it to manifest things differently. And that's where, when I did my research, after I was living alone in Chicago for a year, I realized that quarks are the smallest building blocks of matter, at least what we know today. Of course, we're discovering new
Okay.
things all the time, but quarks are the smallest elements of matter. There's 6 identifiable quarks so far that science has been able to identify. But the curious thing about these quarks is that they combine to create infinite possibilities in the universe. So it's like, and by the way, they're all made of light. So we're made of light. Everything is made of light.
Yeah.
And these quarks combine, and they can combine to create a blade of grass, a being, or a dog. And to me, that's the stuff, the ingredients that the creator uses to create. It's light.
Yeah.
Light heals and transforms us, and light is used to create. So in that place, that's one of the most profound things that I got out of that experience. But the life review was interesting to me because while I was in that place looking down on myself, I began to see some of the nurses that were caring for me come in and out of patients' rooms. And interestingly enough, it was only the nurses that I had made negative assumptions about that I got a life review of.
Really? Oh, you're kidding. So it was God's way of saying, no, you're reading this wrong. Let me show you. Oh
Exactly.
my gosh. So you got to see what was really going on behind the scenes with them?
Well, here's what's fascinating about it is that I was actually shown their life in a regression of events. It was like watching a trailer to a movie in high speed, and as it was going backwards, anytime something happened to that person, whether it was circumstances out of their control, abuse, a violent act, a bad personal choice, whatever it was almost like the trailer would stop for that millisecond so I can see what happened. When it was over, I had this picture or portrait of what that person was, who they were today. And I got the same life review of myself. I saw the personal mistakes that I had made and the things that I was most shameful about. And I thought to myself in that place, how have I ever judged myself, other people so harshly? Yes, we're responsible for our own actions. Yes, we have to take responsibility for that. But sometimes there are things out of our control, and sometimes our actions really don't represent the best part of us.
Yeah.
And when I got that life review, I came back and I said, wow. And it lent credibility to this interactive web that binds us all. I became part of, in knowing that if I hurt myself, I hurt everything connected to me, but if I loved, it would spread.
That's powerful. Absolutely. I mean, wow, if people just knew that. And also how we're all sum totals of our experiences and the
Yes.
decisions we make in it. And you saw it that was interesting that they let you see the others as well, because they were interacting with you.
Well, they were interacting with me, exactly. And interesting that I only got life reviews of those that I had made these negative assumptions about, because sometimes we look at someone and we judge them for whatever it is that doesn't seem to fit our perception or our expectation of what we
You're
want,
right. Yeah.
And I've learned that sometimes expectations are the precursor to disappointment and to bitterness. So we have to be careful of these things.
And don't you think it's also true that when we see in others things that we don't like, it's really an aspect of ourselves we don't like?
Oh,
Many
yeah.
Ouch.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true.
Well, so was it rough? So many people, I know quite a few that don't even want to talk about their life review. It was awful. Was there anything positive? Any areas that you were like, wow, okay, that's pretty good?
Yeah, there were. There were areas where I said to myself coming out of that, I should have trusted more. I should have listened more
Wow.
to my intuition, to my gut. And I think this is where we have to learn to trust ourselves. And we have to understand too that when we get these intuitions, this is what I believe. I've come to believe that intuition, that knowledge, that talent, that all of these things come from spirit, because
Yeah.
we're spiritual beings living inside these fragile clay vessels, having a human experience. And I don't know who we think we are, that we can create, because we can't create anything. Only God can create. And I believe that all knowledge comes from spirit. Spirit is what animates all life. When I listen to famous musicians and writers and athletes, and you really listen to these people, I remember Paul Simon, I watched him in an interview once, and they asked him, where does he get his inspiration? Where does his music come from? He said, I just sit at my piano and I wait for the show to start.
That's funny. Well, he surrenders, and
he surrendered, because when you trace the Greek and Latin roots to, for example, to inspire, it means to breathe and blow into. So who's breathing and blowing into us? It's spirit.
Yeah.
That gives us this knowledge.
Right.
So
You're
we have
right.
to learn.
And I would imagine a lot of times what comes through in readings with people, it might be a father or somebody, whoever, or a spouse that might have regrets because they didn't spend enough time with the family. If only they had trusted, it would have worked out all along anyway. So this is
Absolutely.
good. This is, because we need to partake and enjoy life too. And when we stay in a state of worry, it doesn't really help anybody.
No, worry's not going to change anything. And I think what really drove that home, and what really drove my experience, what was the most profound and life-changing part of this experience for me, and all of this, it comes full circle, and all of it's connected, Tamara. But I saw my daughter Maria in that place. And what's curious about this is that, so my daughter is total care. She's special needs. She's nonverbal. And she has seizures and a lot of terrible things that my wife and I have had to deal with all these years. And, I saw her in that place. And when I saw Maria, she was perfect. She was standing there.
Wow.
And she was perfect.
God.
And she was whole.
Oh my gosh.
And there was this beautiful light streaming through her eyes. And it was unlike any other light that we know. It was the divine light that animates all life.
Oh yeah.
She looked so beautiful, and she was standing there. And like I say, to me, there was no language in that place. It was the unspoken language of the ethereal. And I asked Maria, I said, Maria, how I've longed to hear your voice. I just want to hear you say one time, I love you, Daddy. We don't know what to do for you anymore when you're having seizures, when you're in pain. Tell us what to do. What can I do? And she said 3 magic words that changed my life forever. And she looked at me and she said in that unspoken language, just love me.
Just love me?
Just love me.
Wow.
And when she said, just love me, I cried out into that infinite space. I said, I never want to leave this place.
I know. Well,
and when I said that, Tamara, I found myself back in my hospital bed. Wow. And I was very, very angry about it. But I can tell you, Maria had this smile on her face, and I've seen that smile in the temporal world that we live in. And when I saw that smile there, I knew what she's been trying to tell me all these years. Wow. Even though she's suffering in this vessel, she's perfect in spirit.
Right. And we all are. That's how God sees all of us, as perfect. And once we cross, we really are. We don't have these, crazy minds that come with us where we question so many things that are not important. Wow, right. How beautiful. So you were probably able to see her in that perfection afterwards, that just a loving child of God afterwards. I mean, didn't that change?
Oh, totally. I mean, you know, I'll share something intimate with you that I don't share with a whole lot of people, but I think it's important because that's just the rabbit hole we're running down here. But
Mm-hmm.
so in part of my life review, one of the things that I was shameful about is that you can imagine for many years I saw Maria as a burden because my wife and I, you know, we sold everything. We've spent our 401ks. We sold our house one time. We've done everything to try to find a cure for her, and I put all of that burden on myself. My ego said, if you can't cure her, you know, you're worthless. You need to do this. You
Wow.
created her.
Right.
It's your child. And so my wife and I went on this quest. We've taken her everywhere. We've gone to every healer that you can possibly imagine. We've been hoodooed by everybody. The medical community failed us. Energy healers failed us. You know, all these saints failed us. Everything failed us. And, you know, the whole time, Maria was just trying to tell us, hey, I'm perfect in spirit. I really appreciate all the things you're trying to do to make my life better. And all the things we have done, by the way, have made her life better. I mean, for her condition, she's better than most. And I'm not saying that we're ever going to give up on that. We're going to continue to try to heal Maria and give her the best quality of life possible. But the difference is that I no longer have to do it alone. And I no longer have to feel guilty about healing her because I don't have that kind of power.
No.
You know?
Wow. And to make that shift, wow, that's what she just wants to be loved. I mean, but you're amazing parents to do everything that you have. I mean, what dedication and love. And then you see people that have the gift of children that are so neglectful and not appreciative. And here,
Yeah.
you know, how much love you have for your daughter. It just speaks volumes about you both as people.
Well, thank you.
But wow, you're right. She's flawless. She's perfect in God's eyes. And that's how we really all are, despite whether we look that way or not. So
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. And did this, I mean, I would imagine that all the things spiritually that you've changed and gone through and your awarenesses, didn't that have a big impact on your wife too? Because you two are close. You've been married a long time. I mean,
oh,
did it
tremendous.
affect her as well?
Tremendous impact on my life, Tamara. I mean, now, you know, here's what it really means to me in a nutshell. It's one word: freedom. Because when you know where it is you're going and you have nothing else to fear, what's there to worry about? I mean, you know, I know where I'm headed now when I leave this level of consciousness, when my body dies. I believe that we're eternal beings in spirit. And I know that I'll see Maria again, and I'll be able to have that conversation with her. I'll be able to see Frosty again and have a conversation. And I think it's a beautiful way to look at life and to think about how we are all one and how we're connected. And it's changed the way I deal with people, and it's changed the way I live my life.
Well, it would have to. It would have to. And what about the man in the company? What a difference he made. Did you ever tell him, the head guy, the boss, the head of it all? Did you tell him?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And ironically, he's an atheist.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, all I got to say is you'll find out.
Well, I think, believe me when I tell you. So he's, you know, of course, he's got a personalized signed copy of my book. I think that it's given him great pause, my experience, because as you read through the book, understand that coincidences are just God's way of remaining anonymous. There are really no coincidences.
I love that. Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one, Rob. Yeah. Okay. So coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. That is good. You need to put that on a bumper sticker and sell it. That is good. Honestly, that's a good, seriously, that is a good little nugget there. That is good, but it's true. There are no coincidences. We're forgotten a part of the divine. You're right. I think that we're creation in the fact that we're part of creation. God created us. We can co-create. It's a lot better if we ask for help and listen to spirit. It's a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, because, I think that, Tamara, one of the things that, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, that, one of the things
Okay.
that you had asked me is, what are some of these spiritual tips that you can offer people? And I think that the most important one, and there's a chapter in the book entitled Identity Crisis, excuse me, is because when we realize that our real identity comes from God, and that we're just a little piece of that light. I mean, so the Creator is this, divine, irreproachable light, love and light. And to think that we're a piece of that, and we have to be, because we're created by God. And when we realize that that's our real identity,
Yeah.
man, we could do anything.
Right. Well, I mean, it's and that we do live forever, and that we're just having this experience now, and even more than just the light. I mean, I saw Jesus in mine, a couple of mine, and he tells me this. He told me this last year. He said, I said, "What's the purpose of it all?" I asked him. He goes, "Be the love you were created to be," and that's what we're here to do.
That's beautiful.
It is. I didn't say it. He said it. It is beautiful. And if you think about it, it's kind of deep, but it's kind of simple.
Yeah.
But yet we don't do it.
No, I know that. But see, that's the goal. And that's the goal.
It is the goal.
That's part of your mission. The reason why you pour so much time and effort and love into these podcasts. It's part of my mission to spread as much love and light as we can while we're here, and show people how to do it and lead by example. Because at the end, I've come to understand that how we allow the divine to express through us while we're here.
I say that all the time. That's what I say. That's it. That's it.
I mean, the rest is folly. It's not about how much money we make or what we consume. Nobody ever grew spiritually or learned anything while they were on vacation. Trust me.
No, that's true. You're right. It's not, I mean, and we've lived, we've had so many lives. It just keeps going on. We're trying to learn, and it is not about the money or the fancy trips or the fancy this or that. It's none of those things. It's the relationships we have and how we interact with people, all peoples. And I think our intentions is part of that too. If we harbor bad intentions, like you said about the nurses, why are they like this? And that was presented to you. I think it's sending people love flow. So I try to switch that energy. Like if I don't like someone, let's say they're being mean, whatever. I try to stop and go, okay, send them a love flow. Do you know a lot of times they'll start reaching out and being all nice to me?
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm like, oh, well, I really didn't expect that. And I'm like, okay, I don't really dislike you. I actually like you, okay. But it's because people pick up on that. They pick up on that if you send a love flow or not. And if we can all just have that internal dialogue too, to catch yourself when we start judging. I've gotten a lot of lessons this year on not that I'm a judgy person, but just all the parameters of judging, how people judge us, how we judge other, how we not judge like necessarily make wrong, but we have assumptions that we make before we meet someone.
Yes.
And again, Jesus, he told me, he said that we should all hold up the mirror to ourselves before we start looking at that and the other person. Look at that in ourselves first. I was like, ouch. And we've all been all things. So yeah, we're just trying to help each other, why we're here. Now I want to go back to the Chicago thing. So, I mean, I'm still like, wow, you had to have all these things attached to you. And again, it's amazing. State-of-the-art equipment that's now changed lives. So you did get obviously the transplant. You look fantastic, look very healthy. But again, this whole thing with suicides did come up again, and I do want to say this for people. I get it all the time that people ask me, since I'm a medium. I've been seeing and talking to them since 3, but I'm professionally trained too. But it's always asked, oh, suicide, are they in hell? No, they're not. Most of the times they will come through and they'll give evidence, you know, something beautiful that they're doing over there, that they're fine. And it's just not like that. I have lots of suicide, and I've had ones that are accidents that are labeled as suicide. Like, I really didn't mean to take those pills with the thing. I was just really upset about the divorce. That, you know, oops, you know, that, and people think it's suicide and they're trying to find it, but it was just a person that was at a low point that accidentally took too many things together. And that's another common one too.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, it's either most of the time, you know, it's drug related. Of course, there's mental illness. There are a lot of factors, and I think a loving creator understands that no one in a healthy right mind would do that.
You're absolutely right. You're at that's actually, that's said beautifully. No, what you're right. They are mentally traumatized. Either something happened or there's mental illness or something.
Sure.
Absolutely. And I've gotten several suicides come through and saying, I'm sorry, I wasn't right. I'm fine now. And they're much lighter and happier, but they do get help on the other side. I mean, we get help here, we get help over there. Wherever we are in our spiritual progress, we pick back up. There's no shortcuts, unfortunately. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah, I agree, Tamara, because I know that Frosty, what I sensed from Frosty was deep regret. I mean, he left a daughter behind.
I'm sure.
His parents were, I mean, they aged inside of 2 years, they aged 10. I mean, so I know he has deep regret, and people have to understand, and this is where that experience, and I think that's why I had that experience in the web when I was connected to everyone and everything, that if I hurt myself, I hurt everything connected to me, because people have to understand that there's tremendous collateral damage involved in suicide. Oh, you know, nobody's going to miss me, I'm worthless, and none of those things are true. But, you know, there is darkness out there, and we can get drug into the darkness. And this is where the vicissitudes of life, addiction, some of these bad things happen. And that's how the enemy drags us into the dark, makes us feel worthless. You know, social media sometimes does a really good job at that. I feel so bad for young women getting bullied and kids that are different. So there are a lot of ways to get drug into the darkness and out of the light. And I think that those things have to be taken into consideration when we try to judge someone for suicide.
For a minute there, I was going to go, amen. I was like, are you sure you're just a motivational speaker? I felt like we're having a sermon. I was like, yeah. But you're right, because it can be that easy. And it's just having compassion for someone. I mean, anyone, if they're put in the wrong circumstances, can lose their mind momentarily. And have moments of darkness, and people shouldn't judge, because things can change so quick, and to have compassion.
That's right.
So now tell us about, I know that you received your heart donor that was, of course, again, we're back to suicide. Can you tell us, but it's very heartfelt at the same time. So when did you find out, when you were going into surgery and you had a donor, when did you find out about the actual person? Was it after the fact?
Oh yeah. So the way the process works is that you don't know anything about the donor. As you can imagine, this is a very sacred thing.
Sacred.
Because, and especially with the heart, and we'll talk a little bit why the heart is different than any other organ actually, but you know, so when you go through this process, you actually have to wait 1 year to write a letter to the organ donation facility, and we have organ donation facilities all over the country. Mine just happened to be a facility called Gift of Hope, which is in Chicago. So Tamara, you have to wait a year, because you have to give the donor family time to mourn and to process this. And so after 12 months, you're allowed to write a letter to the donor family anonymously, and it's up to them if they want to connect with you. So that's what I did.
Really? Okay, that's how that works. I got it. So I can imagine. Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay, I got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
what happened after that year? I mean, well, let's go back before that. When you had the obviously the operation took very well. Did you start
Yeah.
sensing another? You know, I'm a medium. I have to ask these questions because I sensed a female, a beautiful female around you, like almost angelic. And well, anyone to offer that, what a gift of life! They are like an angel. So, did you sense another person around? Did you start having like likes or desires, dislikes? Did any of that change, like you hear?
Very much so. And actually, for me, it started. That here's what happens when you get your birth heart taken out. You get a donor heart. First of all, and a lot of people don't know this, the heart has its own brain. And the only reason why heart transplant works is because the heart has its own brain. So when you take out your birth heart, there's a connection. There are pathways that are built between the heart and the brain that are disconnected. And the only reason why, again, transplant works is because the brain that's in the heart begins to try to communicate with the brain,
Right.
and build these new pathways, because it controls our fight or flight, it controls our adrenaline, it controls all of those things. Those are neuronal pathways, but they also found that it communicates through electromagnetic, like an aura. So what happens is that, as we know from from basic biology, the heart, of course, is the first thing that forms in a woman's womb, because it's the heart that's got to pump blood through the rest of the fetus to to feed it and to communicate with the brain. So
Right.
a lot of people have it backwards. It's not the brain that communicates with the heart. It's the heart that communicates with the brain. So a lot of our personal preferences are stored in the heart. Our
Yeah.
tastes in music, foods, some of
Yeah.
our essence. They'll never know exactly how much of our essence. And some people say it's the seat of our soul, the heart, and I don't know if I know that, but some of the essence of our being is stored in that brain and the heart.
Yeah.
When I got mine, it was actually when I first came to and had tubes removed, it was beating so hard that I was actually having to hold on to the rails of my bed. It's like knocking me out of my bed.
Because you're not used to a healthy, strong heart. You've been so weak. Is that it?
Well, that was part of it. But, it was kind of like the essence of that person also, is beating inside of you and trying to communicate, and it's trying to communicate with your brain, build these new pathways. But for me personally, it's interesting because typically when you get a new heart, it goes through this process called, there's a phenomenon called SAG, which means that the heart knows that because it's smart, it has a brain, it's not in its birth home. It doesn't want to beat. So that when they put it in you, it's like, hey man, I'm not home. I have
This
no
is
reason to
unfamiliar. I don't
yeah,
know their
I don't know this
activities are
place.
different than what I
Yeah.
know.
So they have to give you this medicine to kind of jumpstart it and make it beat for a couple of days until it says, okay, I give up. I'll just check this place out, right? So, but for me, it was rare. As soon as they put this heart in, it took off. And they didn't have to use any medicine whatsoever. It just took off running. Like, hey, okay, I can dig it. I'm home. So I'm gonna go ahead and start doing my thing. And from that moment on, I knew that there was something going on. There was something different. I knew that this heart was trying to speak to me. I knew this heart had a mission, and I needed to figure it out. So after a year passed, I was getting very, very frustrated. I wrote to the donor family, never got any response whatsoever. And I had gone to the University of Chicago for, this was about a year and a half after transplant, for a 50th anniversary of heart transplant. And they had this big gala, And there was a lot of other heart transplant folks there that, got their heart when I did. They were on my floor. And we started chatting, and some of them had heard from their donor families. And I was very upset about that. So I had asked this woman how she did it. And through a series of coincidences, I worked with the Gift of Hope, and they dug into my file because I had written 2 letters. And interestingly enough, the second letter that I sent, the father of my donor heart called the Gift of Hope and said, my child's best friend wants to know more about this person. And I'll tell you what happened, Tamara. So as it turns out, and I'll talk to your audience about this, it's in the book. As it turns out, my donor heart was a 20-year-old, beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that had taken her own life. And she had an affection for special needs children like my daughter, and was born 3 months before my daughter. And
Wow.
so many, when I met the father, there were so many of these so-called coincidences that you just can't make this stuff up. You can't write it. For example, she was a natural-born pencil sketch artist that drew all of these black and white sketches, and her father gave me her portfolio to show me. And ironically, they were almost identical to the sketches that my mother would draw. She was also a natural-born artist, an Italian immigrant, never took an art lesson. And these two, their art was uncannily similar.
Their style and everything.
Their style and everything, how they expressed emotion with tone, and with how they would use different shades of gray to express it. And then it turns out that this girl's favorite flower was a daisy. And she drew this bouquet of daisies, which she actually got tattooed on her arm and was buried with it. But that same exact bouquet of daisies, there's a picture of my father, which it was his favorite flower, kneeling behind a bouquet of daisies at our garden back home in Pennsylvania. It was just
Beautiful.
incredible things that had happened.
Wow. I mean, more than synchronicity. It's like a big, beautiful plan. And the fact that your wife was praying so intently that you had to be here because you had the special needs daughter. And this young lady knew this, said,
She knew it.
She knew it. She knew this. We've got to pump this heart. We have got to be here for this. He's got to be here for this young lady.
Exactly. And I think that was, and I've talked to my heart transplant surgeon. He's transplanted over 1,500 people, and we're now very good friends. And we talk all the time about this. And he's incredibly spiritual. He's Indian, and he follows a holy man in India by the name of Sai Baba.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, a lot of what I learned in my near-death experience also is what Sai Baba preaches. And one of those things is that we can only control our own actions, but the outcome is determined by God.
Beautiful. Yes.
And it certainly is. And he also said to me after reading my book, my transplant surgeon, he said, I believe that Molly's purpose was, you guys were connected by this web. Yeah. We all are. Her purpose was probably to give you her heart.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely. And it's really strange when you mention your parents. It's almost like they were part of it, giving a blessing. Like it was just like you were family before you even knew her.
Yeah, exactly. And to have her live inside me, I call it the we and the me. To have her live inside me and come home, and I don't even need any medication. She just starts beating and says, "Okay, yeah, I'll take over now."
Yeah, it was her will that agreed to it, and she saw your purpose too, and she saw. I mean, look at all the things that you're going to do that you've already done, but that you're going to do, and so yeah, she agreed to that. That's why it just took off like a racehorse. Wow.
Well,
So whatever happened,
exactly.
what about the parents and the father or the mother, did they ever somewhat accept you, or did you meet the mother, or how did that work?
Yeah, I did. So what happened then the following year, uh, every year they have an annual celebration for Molly, uh, celebration of life. They have a balloon release and so on and so forth. So
Oh, that's nice.
before COVID hit, I was able to go up. I met the mother. I had met the father prior to he invited me to, the celebration of life. So I had met the father, and he's the one that gave me all the details about her and her laptop and the drawings and everything else. And then when I went up, I got to meet the mother. Since then, she's passed away. And the father, I do stay in touch with. It's not the warmest relationship in the world that I would like, because there's some issues there with him personally. But it's Molly's best friend Natalie and I who have become very good friends. And as a matter of fact, and she's my daughter Maria's age. She's going to be coming down here this summer with her mom to meet Maria and to meet my family. And so we've stayed very, very close.
Oh, wow.
And
Keep going. The story just keeps going.
keeps going. And, she wants to help get the message out about suicide, because, one of the biggest things that drove Molly into the darkness was social media and how she got bullied and, always striving for perfection in this unreal reality of social media, which is impossible,
Right.
to live, because it's unreal. So
Oh,
that was one of the things that drove her.
well, wow, that is, I could feel that when you say that. And, just look at, if you just randomly turn on a social media, people can be so cruel for no reason. I mean,
Oh,
we're supposed to, why would you, I wouldn't be mean, like they say just mean things. And I'm like, why? I mean, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I wouldn't say mean things like that to a stranger. So I think it's really important to limit that stuff. And if there's anyone unhealthy, you wish them well, but you can't have that around. That's terrible that left such an impression. I mean, you can imagine if kids that are growing up, I'm sure it affects a lot of them.
well, it does, and I've seen this too many times, Tamara. These kids, they once they get an iPhone or well, I shouldn't use any brand, but once they get a smartphone or a laptop, and they get into this unreal world,
Yep.
they start to lose their own identity. They start to lose touch with nature, with all of these beautiful
Mhm.
things around us that we take for granted. And I don't see kids running around like I did, building dams and playing with frogs and getting their knees dirty. Now it's all,
True. Yeah, you're right. Or my mom would send us out to go ride on your bicycle, go outside and play.
yeah,
Right? You don't see that.
no, you don't get exercise. You don't do anything. You live in this virtual, unreal world where everybody
Mhm.
strives for perfection, and there's no such thing,
Or I've seen before, before the whole COVID, and you go out, and I've seen on a couple times young people dating, and you could tell they're on a date, and they're looking at their phones, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I mean, aren't you interested in this person you took, that you're out with? I mean, and they won't even look at one another. So it is become
yeah,
quite unhealthy. So it's interesting with what that message on that really Molly working through you and through others, how she's going to respond to that in this world, to help others, right?
right,
Something's
right.
going to happen. I don't know what, but yeah, so many, I think it's you should limit that because it can be poisonous.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, so going back, so gosh, so far as mentally integrating this, what about you as a person? How did you have any difficulty mentally integrating this experience of getting the new heart, or how did you come to spiritual and psychological terms with all of that?
What a great question, which I was hoping you would ask.
Okay, well, I'm glad I asked it. Um, I'm I mean, this is just so fascinating. I mean, it had to be a transition, even though you're grateful.
Well, there's a chapter in the book, and I deal with this in the book, but there's a chapter in the book, Tamara, entitled "It's Not Home Anymore." And what it was is that, so after you get a heart transplant, you have to live near the hospital for 1 year. They're responsible for you because every week you have to get testing. They take biopsies. I mean, it's a very, very fragile period. And if something happens to you in that first year, that you have a rejection, which can be common, then they can lose their transplant license. So I had to live in Chicago. I had to get an apartment, live there by myself for a year. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me the time to begin to process all this. But I also had to go through my own period, like you say, trying to integrate this and trying to grapple with beauty and love and acceptance and connectedness, the ethereal that I experienced, and coming back into the world that I didn't want to be a part of anymore. And I went through this terrible depression and guilt, because here I was, everybody that worked so hard to save my life, my employer, the sacrifices my employer made, my wife, my family. And I knew that coming back here to see Maria safely to the other side and protect her and be with my wife and share this story was a big part of my mission. For months and months and months on end, I wasn't ready to accept that. And I went through this period of every morning I would get up and I would get into this meditative state for hours, trying to get back to the ethereal. I wanted to get back to that place of
Hey,
love.
you're speaking to the choir here. I totally get it. A lot of people don't understand that, because there's so much love and acceptance, and then you come here and you get all sorts of stuff, but it's not that. Even if you do get love, it's not that intense. But then we come to a world that's also broken too, so it's trying to put all that back into play. So I can see how you would feel that way. It's actually very common with people. I mean, every now and then I'll get sad, but now I know I can just go there in my mind. That's why I got so good at it, because you can visit it without actually dying. So, right, just for comfort. I mean, just so you can comfort yourself.
You can. I mean, you can. I mean, what's that?
No, I was just going to say that's probably why you got into this deep meditative state, because you just wanted to feel that connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can go so far with meditation, but I could never really climb that ladder, as it were, again, and get to that place where I could see Maria perfect and whole again, and feel, that peace. But I tell you what shifted and how I got out of that whole thing. So I had my boss actually knew that I was going down this this rabbit hole. So he calls me one morning, and he belongs to this, of all things, it's a Chinese American Christian church that was happened to be
He's the atheist. Is this the atheist guy?
No, well, he's not an atheist. He was my direct boss, actually.
Okay, the direct boss, not the head boss. Okay, go ahead. All right.
Yeah, he got converted.
He's not now.
Yeah, so he says to me one morning, he said, "Hey, Rob, I want to bring my pastor by the apartment, Pastor Man." And he said, his English is pretty good, and he's he wants to come and see you. And I said, "I don't know, Paul. I don't know if I want to see this guy. I've talked to a lot of pastors. I'm fine." He said, "No, I'm bringing him over." So he brings him over, and it was a beautiful fall day, and we sat out on the front porch, just me and Pastor Man, and all of a sudden I just broke down, and I just let it all out. I said, "Look, this is what I'm going through," and I started to cry, and I'm depressed, and I don't want to be here anymore, and I feel so guilty about that. And he paused, and he looked back at me, and he said, "You know what your problem is?" And I said, "No, what is it?" And he said, "You've grown too fat in the spirit, having been on your journey into the ethereal." And he said, "To get thin again, you're going to have to learn to see the divine in everything, because you don't have to learn, you don't have to leave the earth to see the divine.
Oh my gosh, what wisdom. How beautiful.
And when he said that, you know, my whole world began to open up. And I said, oh, I get it. And he left, and I went and took a walk. And for the first time, I used to be involved in the martial arts, and I used to do these silly things like when I trained, I'd pull leaves off of trees and I would put them in my hands when I jogged, and I would ask them to give me their energy. And I always thought that that was a silly thing. But I learned that from when Pastor Mann told me that that's how I started to see the divine again in everything, and the beauty in everything. And most importantly, so I went for this long walk that day through the park and through the neighborhood, and I began to understand that the only way that God can experience and express life is through us.
Yes. Yeah.
So God both expresses and experiences life through us. And when we understand that, and we learn to see the divine in everything around us and in other people, that's how we get there.
Right.
And that was the big shift for me.
Wow.
And I stopped trying to get back into the ethereal and realized that that the divine is in you and in me, and all we have to do.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at someone's eyes, it doesn't matter whose. It could be someone from another country. Maybe you can't even exchange the same language, and you look in their eyes, you can see that little spark of God in them.
Oh yeah, that's that quirk of light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, and that also can be a good reflection, because then maybe we can recognize that in ourselves too. So while your journey is still going, you are opening up new chapters. You're going to have Quarks of Light 2, or whatever you want to call it, because this is still going. This is amazing.
Yeah. Well, you know, Tamara, I'm not sure what it is. I'm beginning to feel that urge again. I don't know if it's a workbook, like a spiritual workbook on, you know, how to stay in spirit and deal with the vicissitudes of life.
Oh, that would be so needed. Oh yeah, that would go. People need that. They don't know how to be anymore.
Well, I'm working on the audiobook now, something that I should have done early on. But it's also, you know, an opportunity to get the book back out there again. I realize that a lot of people now, you know, going back to work after COVID, don't have the time to read. So I'm going to work on the audiobook. Hopefully I'll have it launched by the end of summer, and it'll give the opportunity to get the message out there into a broader audience, and you know, continue to speak and spread this message and
absolutely.
do
Oh,
this
this is
work.
just the beginning. I know you've been doing lots of interviews, but it's still just the beginning for you. It is. I mean, you know, the thing is, if we just allow it and allow God to work through us, and again, He expresses, you know, He, she, the source, divine love expresses through us different ways. But if we
Yes.
allow that, I always say God knows so much better. His will is so much better than mine. I mean, He can come up with better scenarios than I could. And something much more magical. And do you not feel like after your experience that life is magical now?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. You know, and I got to tell you, I'll tell you a secret. I start each day in such gratitude. I mean, every morning when I wake up, just to enjoy a good cup of coffee, just to breathe, I find that, you know, the more I express my gratitude for just being and to be able to love another day and live another day, the more I get. You know, what my daughter would give to be able to feed herself, to be able to talk, basic little things that we take for granted. And when we realize how much potential we have, you know, with each given day, just out of gratitude, it's amazing. It's an amazing journey. I mean, it's just such a miracle just to be able to talk to you. You know.
Absolutely. And I do that too. I start out when I wake up, I go, I'm awake. I'm still here. And then I begin with my gratitude. And sometimes I'll just, look at my fingers or feel, and I'll go, wow, I'm here. I'm very fortunate to be here. And I don't want to waste it. And just every little thing, like when I pet my dog, the fur, I'm going, that's the softest fur I've ever felt. Wow, that's great fur. Thank you, God. And so I try to be appreciative of everything, just little things. It's a big deal. And I think people don't know how to really do that. But I think there's something else to that. With the gratitude, there's a surrender, there's a humility, and it also creates a love flow. Like I have a Shih Tzu, which I rescue. I'm obsessed with my dog. I have two, but this one is a rescue. And it's just something, I've had dogs my whole life, but it's just such a innocence and purity and so kind. It just doesn't really want much. It's had a heart condition, should have been gone a year ago. But my job is just to love it. I said, okay, I can do that. I love you.
Yeah.
You're very special. And I'm always sending a love flow to him. So I think I can't really figure out if it's a gift from God to say, I said, it just makes me happy. That's all. That I'm doing my job, but it also, I'm seeing this little fella become more personality and happy. And I'm like, I don't know how long that's going to last, but if I could give him love and it changes little personality, that I gave another little creature, confidence and knowing what it's like to really be loved, then I feel like I did a good job. So it's little things in life. I think that people have forgotten. It's not the big stuff.
No, you're absolutely right. It's easy. These are the easy things we can do.
Well, they're easy, but they're forgotten too. And you know what it's like to play the corporate game and all that. I used to have an advertising agency and work with, I said, manufacturers and corporations, and that's fine. But the whole achieving, there's nothing wrong with achieving things, but you achieve those things so you can come back and look at your wife's face, or sit down and relax on your porch and look at the beautiful nature. That's why we do these things. So we can enjoy these little small things and just being outdoors, and we can walk or we can breathe.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I can't wait to see these other things that you're going to do. Everything you're going to do is needed. It's just needed. And you don't have to have a near-death experience to wake up. You can just decide, look, I want to be spiritually conscious and mature. I really want to be a better person. That it can just start with that, and learning through people like you, learning the hard lessons through your life.
Yeah, trust me. I mean, I always tell people, please take a minute to listen to what I have to say, because, I had to die to figure this out, and I don't want you to have to go through that.
That's what I'm saying. You've been through a lot of trauma too, and you had to experience all these, how to figure all this out. I mean, there's some heavy stuff, and now you are coming from a place that that you can really give back and help people and give them some wisdom to how to live a happier life, and just not just with them, but this world, how they matter. So do it all. I'm excited. So thank you so much for your time. You really are a joy. And I love how you're vulnerable and you just are you, because that tells other people it's okay. Just be vulnerable too. Just be yourself. There's no such thing as perfection.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamara. I appreciate that. I think that I had an experience when I was writing my book, and a friend of mine that I consult, and when I was going through the process, and she said, Rob, if you're afraid to say some of these really personal things, and I really put myself out there in the book, took a lot of risks. Yeah. And she said, you know what, that's what's going to make the book. If you're afraid to be vulnerable and put this stuff out there, you're not going to have the impact you had hoped for. And that was a great lesson for me. So you're right. And I appreciate you picking up on that, Tamara, because if we're not authentic, we're just wasting our time.
And by the way, I must laugh. Thank you, Spirit. That was a message for me you just gave me, because my book has been almost done, but there's some things I'm afraid to put in there, not to be cruel, not to be mean, but to be authentic. authentic. And so that was for me. So thank you.
You're welcome.